With how corporate greed is consuming modern game console manufacturers, I thought it would be worth it to ask if these consoles are worth their prices because, while we all know they aren't, I feel like sometimes people need a reminder on why they aren't worth their prices. The consoles I'm going to be looking at are the PS5, Xbox Series X, Nintendo Switch 2, and Steam Deck. So, let's begin. Is the PS5 worth $650? Well, let's see. First off, this console is ugly and its design is stupid. The PS3 Slim and OG PS4 were all black, sleek, and looked cool. This is neither sleek nor cool. Like, what practical application does the Dr. Doofenshmirtz-esque lab coat serve? They even ignored common sense and made the sides round, so it looks bad if you try to lay it on its side. For comparison, the PS3 had a round top, but its bottom and sides were flat, so it wouldn't look bad if you displayed it standing up or laying down. I know these are kind of nitpicks in the grand scheme of things, but at the same time, why make these dumb decisions in the first place? Now, onto the games. Where are they? Yeah, it's 2026 and the whole PS5 has no games meme is still relevant. There are no games exclusive to the PS5 that people actually care about, as Sony has ported most of their first-party games to Steam. That's not even mentioning that you can play God of War 5, Miles Morales, and Horizon 2 on PS4. So that brings into question why you should even get this thing at all. Multi-platform games are exactly that, multi-platform, and can be played on Steam or Xbox. And to my knowledge, so correct me if I'm wrong, there isn't a big performance gap between the Series X and the PS5. And if you were worried about performance anyway, you would just build a gaming PC. Now, what makes getting a PS5 especially worthless is remote play. You can just stream games from a PS5 to any device that has the remote play app, such as a phone, a laptop/PC, or a PS4. So, if you really wanted to, you could just see if one of your friends has a PS5, set up remote play, then use it when they aren't on their PS5. Now, this all depends on your Wi-Fi, so if you have pretty bad internet, this wouldn't be ideal. But it's a lot more ideal than paying $650 for this, so why not? The final nail in the coffin for the PS5 is that the PS4 is just an infinitely better deal. On eBay, Best Buy is selling refurbished PS4s for $110. That's $540 less than a new PS5, and given how a used disc PS5 is around $400, that's $290 cheaper than that. You can use that money you save to get used games, so you can get more enjoyment out of your PS4. Speaking of used games, does this make you mad, Sony? And the thing with the PS4 is that, like I mentioned earlier, some PS5 games are also available on PS4, and for the ones that aren't, you could just remote play them. The only downside is that you won't get 4K, HDR, and the like, but I think that's tolerable, and I'm sure the average person wouldn't care, especially if you're on a budget. Hell, I'm sure most people can't tell the difference anyway, since we're at the point where improvements in technology aren't really that noticeable between console generations anymore. So, is the PS5 worth its $650 price tag? Hell no! Okay, let's move on to the Series X, because oh boy, do I have things to say about it. Is the Xbox Series X worth $800 US? Well, let's see. First, the console's appearance is very generic, but it's not absolutely terrible like the PS5's is, so it gets a pass. They even made the console flat so you can lay it down without it looking bad. Now, for the games. Once again, where are they? Like, every game you can play on the Xbox Series X can be played elsewhere. Almost every first-party Xbox game can be played on Steam, and Xbox has ported most of their recent first-party games to PlayStation. And as I mentioned earlier, I haven't really heard of any third-party games running noticeably better on Xbox than PlayStation, so that just makes it kinda questionable to own this thing. Well, there is one thing I haven't mentioned yet, and that's backwards compatibility. Unlike the PS5, which is only backwards compatible with PS4 games, the Series X can play all Xbox One games and certain 360 and OG Xbox games. Some of those 360 OG Xbox games get enhancements like 60 FPS, 4K, HDR, etc. Now, keep in mind that most backwards compatible games here didn't get enhancements, but the ones that did got it pretty good. Like, Sonic Unleashed on 360 ran like a PowerPoint presentation and didn't actually run in HD. On Series X, on the other hand, the performance is way better with barely any frame rate drops, the FPS itself got boosted from 30 to 60, and HDR was added. I can say with 100% confidence that this is the best official way to play the game, and I assume this is true for every game that received enhancements. So the Series X has backwards compatibility going for it. Unfortunately, that doesn't make it worth its $800 price, because if the only thing this Series X has going for it is its backwards compatibility with select 360 and OG Xbox games, then it would just be cheaper to get a 360 so you can play more of those games. An official Xbox 360 is around $100. I'm doing the slim model because that's the one that actually works. And an official hard drive is like $50. So that's $150 to be able to play every 360 game in around half of the OG Xbox's library, whereas the Series X can only play around 632 out of the 2,155 games in the 360's library, and only 63 OG Xbox games. That's $650 cheaper than a new Series X. We can take this to its logical endpoint by getting an Xbox One S for around $100, average eBay price, so you have the option of playing those games, and getting Game Pass Ultimate for 1 month for $23 to stream any Series X game on Game Pass to your console. So adding $123 to $150 we have makes it $273. This is $527 cheaper than the price of a new Series X, and since the used Series X I bought was $447.29, this would be $174.29 cheaper than that. Just imagine what you could do with all that extra money. You could probably afford the gold edition of Ultimate Alliance 1. Or, more importantly, you could get a bunch of physical games for your consoles that you get to keep forever. Does this make you mad, Sony? Or you could just spend it on actually important stuff. So, is the Xbox Series X worth $800? No. I don't even think it's worth $400, given that you could play a wider selection of games for cheaper, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, next up is the Switch 2, and oh boy. Is the Switch 2 worth the price of $500? Well, let's find out. Of the consoles covered so far, this is the cheapest one, with it being $150 less than the PS5. Design-wise, I have some thoughts. The actual design of the console does look nice, with it being a logical next step from the Switch 1, i.e. it's pretty much the same design, but bigger and fixes a few design flaws. They fixed the kickstand so it's actually usable now, and the Joy-Cons detach in a better way. I should mention that the dock is very easy to bend inwards, so be careful when you're putting the system into it so you don't damage the screen. $500 by the way. Those are the things about the design I noticed immediately. If you want a more detailed look at the Switch 2, then check out Nerrel's video on it, which is in the description. One very big improvement is that the default storage on the system is 256 gigabytes, which is infinitely better than the measly 30 on the Switch 1. I am pissed that only microSD Express cards work with the Switch 2, as now I have to go buy another 1TB SD card, so that's a downer. Now, onto the games. For the first time in this video, the console I'm talking about actually has games! What a concept! Yeah, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Kirby Air Riders, Star Fox 64 again, Mario Kart World, and other games that I'm too lazy to say are in fact Switch 2 exclusives. And, like the previous two consoles, the Switch 2 is backwards compatible with its predecessor. So, most of your Switch 1 games will work with Switch 2. Does this make you mad, Sony? But I think I should mention the elephant in the room. At launch, there existed a cheaper version of the Switch 2 that performed the same as the regular model. It was a Japanese exclusive and region locked there, and originally cost around $317 if we were to convert it to USD. That is how much a Switch 2 should be worth. So Nintendo is perfectly capable of charging that amount for these, but won't because of greed. Like, I don't see how region locking it would make it cheaper to produce, when every region's version of the console uses the same specs, and even if it did somehow, why didn't they just do this for other regions as well? So it literally is just greed. Bit of a fun fact, I didn't buy mine for $500 or even $450 when it was that price. I got mine for $300 because I, for some reason, had a bunch of GameStop in-store credit. I literally would never have gotten a Switch 2 if it wasn't for that. That should tell you everything. Is the Switch 2 worth $500? No. It is very clear that Nintendo is overcharging for this thing. So, it's Steam Deckin' time. The 950 model isn't worth it. So, that just leaves us with the question, is the 512GB model of the Steam Deck worth its $790 price tag? It's worth mentioning that these are the OLED models. Valve has stopped making the LCD models of the Steam Deck, so these are the only ones you can get new. Another thing is, you don't get a dock with either of them. This has been true for every version of the Steam Deck, so that knocks a couple of points off. Another thing, the storage is easy to upgrade since the Steam Deck accepts any type of microSD card. Cough, cough, Switch 2! Now, onto the actual design. It's kind of exactly what you would expect. It has the same general shape as the Switch, only it's bigger, the controller is built in and can't be removed, has 4 buttons on the back that you can map to any of the face or shoulder buttons, and has no cartridge slot. Other than those differences, it has all the same features like a headphone jack, volume buttons, SD card, slot, etc. Onto the games. The Steam Deck technically has the largest game library out of any console ever because it uses Steam, the biggest PC game platform. So every game on Steam that says it's compatible, which is most games, will work. And if a game isn't compatible, then you can probably force it to be with Proton. Not only that, but you can also add non-Steam games onto the Steam Deck. You do this by using desktop mode, I'll mention this more later, to download the game and set it up, and then add it to your Steam library. You can do this for emulators, fan games, fan PC ports, abandonware, regular games, basically everything you can think of. I'm sure Sony is very mad. The exception to this are games with anti-cheat that hate Linux, because SteamOS is Linux-based. So, if you want to play a game that has that, well, you can't. I have heard you can install Windows on the Steam Deck, so there is that. I mentioned desktop mode earlier, and yeah, the Steam Deck can be used as a regular computer. It can do everything your average laptop can, and just like your average laptop, the battery life is terrible. Now, to be fair, a lot of the games I run are higher end, so that is to be expected, but that does kinda cheapen its portability aspect, so think of the Steam Deck as a Switch-shaped gaming laptop. Now, I'm not a PC guy, so take everything I'm about to say with a grain of salt. With how expensive modern computers are, if you wanted to use the Steam Deck as a computer that also plays games, then the 512GB model probably is worth the price, as it is cheaper than most gaming laptops. If you are just getting this to play video games, then it isn't. You have so many options, from a lot of multi-platform games still being playable on last-gen systems like the PS4 and Xbox One, which are a lot cheaper. Emulators are optimized to run on almost anything, and your average recomp or decomp PC port should run fine on your average laptop. That's not even mentioning that if you really wanted a Steam Deck, you could just get a used one for much cheaper. So, to answer the question if the Steam Deck is worth $790 for the 512GB model, well, if you were going to use it as a PC as well as a game console, then it probably is. But if not, then it's not. Okay, so that's why modern consoles aren't worth their prices. The Series X has a cheaper way to play all of its games, the Switch 2 is just blatantly overpriced, the PS5 straight up has nothing going for it. The Steam Deck was the only thing I can kind of justify because you can use it as a computer. And remember, I'm being very generous to these consoles. I didn't mention game key cards and Switch Online still sucking on Switch 2, Sony stopping production of physical PS5 games in 2028. Does this make you mad, Sony? The PS5's HDMI port being easy to damage, the fact that the drifting issues in all modern controllers still hasn't been fixed after all these years, the constant price hikes Xbox has been having within the past year, and the fact that all of these consoles have only gotten more expensive as time has gone on. All of these leave a pretty bad taste in my mouth, and because of that, I'm not getting the PS6 or the Switch 3 or a Steam machine or whatever the next Xbox is going to be called. Which is a shame because I couldn't imagine saying that in 2019. But I'd hate to end things on a sour note, so I'm not. Let's be positive for a bit. I want to highlight the fan-made ports of N64 games to PC. These just are the best way to play these games, offering things like improved resolution, frame rate, dual analog camera control, remappable buttons, and mod support. I fully recommend anyone that is a fan of these games to try them out. Though you will need resources from an actual copy to get them to work, so extract them from your legal copies. I should also mention that emulators are great and available on a wide amount of platforms, from PC to modded consoles like the Wii and even mobile devices. Once again, you need actual ROMs to use them, so extract them from your legal copies. Both emulators and these PC ports are made by passionate people who spend their free time making and updating them for our enjoyment, all for free, which I think is very commendable in an age where greed is killing the gaming industry.